Hey, it's Ben's from LaunchFlows.com. In this video, I've got a triple play from one of our clients over at LaunchFlows who's asking 3 good questions, and it kind of ties into something that I used to do frequently when I ran 1WDTV. That is to show some real world examples of how you can learn a few skills that help accelerate your capabilities, even if you're using today's page builders. So the first question involves, is there a way to style or allow some styling options to these 2 blocks? And that's the returning customer or the have a coupon block. And they're basically both the same process. I'm going to show you today how to use the inspector inside of your typical Chrome or Safari browser to do this with CSS. As to whether we put these features in, honestly, I'm not sure that I will, because as you'll see in a moment, there are so many variations of how a theme or a plugin handles this that could change it. It's really never going to be possible to override that unless you sort of get into a battle of the exclamation points. And then what I'm going to do is I'll just discuss these other 2 questions at the end, which is how to do this next step link and what I use for translation. Let's jump over here. I've got an example website set up with LaunchFlows and WooCommerce and a custom checkout. The coupon and the recurring customer are very similar. You'll notice in this example, I don't have the coupon. I have our new option to display the coupon open. But the styling issues are the same. Now, if you've never used an inspector, in most cases, without doing anything else, if you have Chrome or Safari, just right mouse click on anywhere on the screen, and you will see the inspect option or something to that effect. And typically, when it opens up on the left side, you will see the DOM elements or the document object model. You'll see the markup of the actual physical website. On the right-hand side, we'll see what are the styles, the actual things that are affecting how those look. And you can adjust this a little bit as you need. Now, I'm going to move my stuff out of the way here so with the video I can see it better. What we want to use is this tool here, which is our selector. And in doing so, when we roll our mouse over, we can see which things are being highlighted. So I'm just going to highlight with that inspector tool the basic area where the returning customer block is. And as I move my mouse now into the identified part of the markup, you can see that as I roll my mouse, I go higher and higher until I escape it. And by doing that, I like to click on the outermost part. In other words, it's sort of like one of those Chinese dolls where there's a doll and a doll and a doll and a doll. And you can see how that kind of, with these little arrows, toggles or has an accordion capability. So here we're on the outermost part and we see that there's now a span of LF login. And now there's the WooCommerce toggle. And as I get deeper, I want you to look on the right-hand side and you will start to see some hints about styling. WooCommerce info. Aha! Look what happens when I hit the WooCommerce info. Over here, there is some CSS called WooCommerce.WooCommerce.info. Border left color. And if I want to know where this is coming from, I can roll my mouse over this URL and it will give me a pretty immediate answer. If we decode this, it says WP content themes cadence asset CSS WooCommerce minimum. That means that this is some styling that is coming from the theme of Cadence, and they have a special style sheet because that's one of the things they built in to ensure that it picks up some of the global colors. Now, this is an example I was referencing a moment ago about why it's nearly impossible for me to put this control into LaunchFlows. The thing that you want to have happen in most cases is for these things to pick up the global styling. You want all of these kinds of notices to always have the same color. And then if you change that color in your global palette, you can see you basically have a really, really easy to manage system. Because just by changing that one global palette color or variation, variable, you have the ability to fix everything without going around. Here's why CSS is useful. CSS can be applied either in your global site, it can be applied at the theme level, at the post level, it can be applied at the page builder level, it can even be applied down to the granular level of just this thing and not that thing on a particular page builder component. But I'm going to show you how to put it into the checkout page itself so that you get the ability to control it just on a page-by-page basis. All right. So first of all, how do we change the color? Well, one of the neat things about Inspector is we can just see the results here of what we're doing. So this is using our global palette. That's a longer conversation I don't want to get into, but basically this is essentially calling from the theme, what is the value of this global palette highlight setting? And you can see when I roll my mouse over, it's a hexadecimal number, 809B57. Hexadecimal is a 6-digit way for us to identify an entire array of colors, and then we can also do things like transparency and so forth, but that's another conversation. If I just click right here, I can type in just regular colors, red, and notice it changes, blue. And I'll just scroll down. Look at the colors at the top. Look at the colors up here as I just roll my mouse down, okay? Or if I want, I can choose a hexadecimal color, and I can do that either from memory, or I can use a free tool. I can go to something like hex colors and just look up values or use a guide or use any of these color codes. It doesn't make a difference. The point is, all you need to do is grab a hex color and put that number in, right? So if I wanted to do so, I could literally say, oh, E389B9, right? And I go over here and I type that in, hex E389B9. And there it is. Okay, now what do you do with this? Well, what we need to do is use our left mouse button, typically, highlight this, and copy. That's the easiest way I know how to do that. You get the whole thing. You can also say copy rule. I tend to find that copy is more reliable. Either way, we're looking for the entire rule. We want all of this. That's why I like to just say copy, because this is essentially a rule and it's got different specific things that it could affect. You notice in our rule, it's only got one element, but there could be rules that have lots of elements with lots of attributes. Okay, now that we've copied it, we have to put it somewhere. And this is where it's interesting. So if I go over on my other site here, by way of example, you can apply the rule at the level of the theme. So like in Cadence, depending on which setup you have, you might go into the customizer and there's the additional CSS. When you do it at this level, it's not always 100% sure that it's going to override the theme. It typically will, but some rules require you to do something additional to make it override stuff. The downside of putting it here, as I just mentioned, is that in doing so, you could potentially end up with a situation where, you know, you've got rules that are banging into each other randomly. Let's refresh this page. This is my demo site and it's a little slow. Okay, so here you've got, for example, in the Cadence theme, additional CSS, you would go to a white space, paste it in. And in the event that it didn't work, the override is to do !important. And that means that depending on which order this CSS is loaded, that will in many cases, if not most cases, override any of the other settings that are put into Cadence. Not always, but in many cases. But again, I don't like this. I don't like this because that is too general. It's applying everywhere. Instead, what I would recommend is you would go into your checkout page itself. Now, I'm not logged into this site. This is a public demo, so I'm not going to modify it. But let's pretend that this is my checkout page over here. And I'm going to show you how you can do it locally. And that way, in doing so, you can override just on this checkout page itself. So here's my checkout on another demo site. If I edit this and I'm in Gutenberg, this would apply to virtually any page builder. It really makes no difference where you put this when you do it this way. I can do basically what we call an inline CSS, or I could use one of the components of Gutenberg. So first of all, depending on what you've got set up in your Gutenberg stack, you may already have the ability, let's say through Cadence, to customize on a page-by-page basis. So here I have Cadence blocks, and it gives me this nice option for page scripts, which I love about Cadence. And here I have a post-specific CSS. I can just paste it in there, and I'm done. I don't need to put a wrapper in there. I don't need to do anything with style tags because this is essentially going to override whatever is in there with wrapping it itself with CSS. And let's see what this looks like. I'm going to update it. This is a different site, by the way, so the color scheme on this was blue. And I'm not sure if I have anything else set up here, so let's just see what it looks like. We've got that very odd login color, so if I am logged out here, it should show up. I may have to open this up, by the way, in a incognito browser, because when I'm logged in, obviously it's not going to ask me for that. Also, you'll notice that this particular demo site is not happy with loading quickly while I'm also live streaming. Okay, so this is my test site, so this is a lot of stuff going on. Let's actually do this. Let's log out. Go to an incognito window instead. Go to LaunchFlows.w, launchifysite dot, or just check out. Let's see if this shows here. And we can see that it works. Okay, this is a custom site setup, but the returning customer thing now has that unusual kind of purplish color. So that is the preferred way of doing it if you have something like Cadence blocks. However, if you don't and you have another page builder, let me show you the inline method. And the inline method is really similar. You're just going to put it in a different spot. So let's take this out of here because you don't want to double it up. And in this case, I can use something as simple as just either a text widget or a text component, or in the Gutenberg world, I would go to the bottom of my page or the bottom of my stack, and I would just add in an HTML block. So type HTML, and here's where you need to add style tags. So you need to type in style with the brackets, then the same thing with a slash, and then end style. Now, while this in many older setups would not be ideal, and this is not really terrific for your optimal CSS and markup, given how Wild West Gutenberg is with the markup now, this isn't going to really have much of an ill effect. And it gives you an easy way at the bottom of any page to kind of get this done, regardless of whether you're using custom blocks. And it's also quite obvious that it's associated with this page. Now, if you want, you can even do the following notation, and be very careful with this. It's slash slash, and then go in with the 2 asterisks. So it's the thing underneath the question mark, and then the thing above the number 8. That's a comment bracket. And you could say, this changes, let's do it in the right text. This changes the style of the login component left margin. Now, personally, I wouldn't bother noting every single thing, but it could be useful if you're trying to figure out later what it is that you did. And this is the proper syntax. This here is just the beginning of a lot of similar things that I'm thinking of offering in a workshop that allows somebody to very quickly learn the key CSS rules and procedures to just override stuff that isn't really easy to do with any of the normal controls, either in a page builder or in Gutenberg and so forth. And be sure, obviously, that you update and save this, and that way it will apply. Now, just real quickly before I leave this topic, the other kinds of things that are typical are maybe you want to change the color of one particular button or a link or something on the page. Using the same methodology, we can use our inspector, and we can go over here and click on the button. By the way, did you notice that when I roll my mouse over, how it actually shows me these values? That's the kind of thing that's possible using your inspector. Typically that happens when you're using an add-on like I am that will also reveal some details. But like it's almost like having an X-ray machine into your site. And since it's so fast and simple to add new rules, it's almost like, why not do that? Let's do, actually, since I'm on this page, let's do a live demo on this so I can change something actually as we're working on it, and you can see the changes. Even though this demo site is atrociously slow to respond, let's inspect it. And let's say, for example, I want to change the color of maybe the labels of these fields, which isn't necessarily that easy to do. So I identify the general area, then I go down inside of my markup and I roll my mouse over to see what is being highlighted. And notice that this is too general. There's too many things in it. But as I get down to label on the right-hand side, once again, I see color and I can test it. Red, green, blue, And I'm not going to do this with hex. Let's just do it blue. Now here's an example of how I'm going to copy the larger rule, but I'm going to remove everything other than the comment about color, or the part about color. So I'm going to copy the whole rule, and I'm going to go back in here where I've already got a style set up, and notice that end bracket, right? There's the starting bracket and the ending bracket. I'm going to go to the next line. I'm going to paste that rule, and I'm going to just eliminate the parts of my new rule that are affecting elements, other attributes of the element, right? So in other words, I don't care about the width or the height or anything else. I only care about the color of this element. And the color is blue. And notice I'm not going to put the important on this. We're going to see whether it'll apply anyway. I click update. And I want to also emphasize, until you save this, it doesn't actually make the change. It only changes after you've saved it so that it's part of the actual page. When I reload the page, and in some cases you may need to actually refresh your browser cache, the rule will apply or not. And in this case, you'll notice it does work even without us having to put the important on it. And that's just a good example of how, depending on the order something loads, it may still work without having to override using the exclamation important declaration. All right, so this is some real basic stuff. Let's cover the other two questions that were asked of me. How is it that you can use the next step link by pasting that shortcut in the URL field of a Gutenberg block? Now, one of the questions involves the fact that a neat element of LaunchFlows is that you can have a thank you page that is custom, but it essentially takes the information from whatever product was just sold, and it uses it either to provide a link to some other page in your site, or as we were showing over here, you can actually have the thank you, actually over here, we can have the thank you with any amount of links, okay? So the way we set this up with the shortcode is you need to go into your product, and let's say here's another product, and you have to use either of those two options. Personally, now that we have the new option to be able to add the custom content, you know, the description details, I actually prefer that. So the product short description is really the easiest way to go. I would actually recommend using that over the next step link, because this allows you to do anything you want with any number of links. However, in the actual product data, we have the LaunchFlows original option called next step link. And what happens is we choose an internal page. Maybe it's the My Account area. So let's go My Account. If I select this and I update this product, now if I use this short code here, LF next step link, I can paste this into any standard button or text element or anything that, if I say click here, the link will generate to this destination, okay? So for another product, if I go over here to my thank you page, I can create now a global thank you page that, depending on which product was added to it, will go to that particular link. Now the downside of that method, and I want to indicate this to you versus the new method, is the next step link is limited to the first thing that was purchased, whereas the new method is unlimited. You can have 20 items in the thank you and they'll all have their own details, which is another reason why I may actually end up deprecating this, who knows. But here's basically how it works. I add a button, and in this case, I would suggest just sticking with the standard buttons. And here we can say, you know, next step, click here. You want to be kind of generic because, again, it's going to change with whatever the first product is in the checkout. Click on link. You simply paste in that short code and hit enter. Then you update and save. That's it. This then dynamically generates the link to go to whatever you put into that product's configuration. So to discuss it one more time, this method was the original one we created, but now just in the last release, we added this new method. And I quite frankly think that the new method is so good and so flexible that we may just remove the next step link altogether, because I honestly can't think of any reason I would use the next step link anymore. And I wrote the product. But you notice here when I roll my mouse over, this essentially gives me the destination and so forth. So I'm suggesting this is how it works, and don't use it because I may very well take it out. All right, finally, what plugin do I recommend for translating WooCommerce strings and notices? Well, almost every component inside of LaunchFlows is translatable, and similarly, obviously, for WooCommerce. So I like Loco Translate for strings. I'm not saying that's the only one you can use, but I love how simple this is. It's got 366 5 stars, and then 11 people maybe didn't like it. It's free. It does everything you need. And I've shown this in other videos. So I'm going to see here. Logo Translate. I think I may have done a LaunchFlows video about this. If not, there are literally dozens and dozens and dozens of other people. I'm not sure if I did it under LaunchFlows or if I did it under WP Launch Club or Launchify. But there is a video of me somewhere doing this. And either way, it doesn't make a difference because it's so easy to use and there's so many people that have made other setups. But basically, otherwise, just search for, string translation plugin for WordPress. And they all work essentially the same thing, right? You can see a whole mess of them here. They all essentially give you the ability to translate. Now, disclosure, I actually work with and represent Weglot. So Weglot is something that I recommend across the board. So to be fair, I don't get any kickback from this, but I can absolutely recommend them first and foremost. If you have the need for the entire site to be translated and you want to use a SaaS solution, I would step it up. I would step up and use Weglot. And I've done demos for this before, by the way. Let me just give you an example. Here's our demo that we use for Weglot. And I definitely have videos inside of our blog on LaunchFlows. Here's an example of a multilingual site, right? So this does two things. It does both. Well, three. It does the entire site can be translated comprehensively with the user choosing which is their default language. Second of all, it can be used for string translation of all the components, but also it's dynamic. It has a dashboard, it has rules, it has conditionals, and it's a comprehensive solution for a multi-language site. Whereas these other things like, Loco Translate are really just for strings. Those are just for I've got other stuff going on. I just want to make sure that the components that the admin sees on the back end are translated or in the labels for the users. So 3 good solutions. And that's it. That's enough. That's 22 minutes of Spence going on and about. I would like your feedback in terms of if you'd like to know more about a workshop that I'm going to do over at WP Launch Club, which this year going forward is going to be converted into an educational center that's going to have a lot of free and even some paid products. But one of the things that I found is that working with CSS and the page builders and these components actually does help a lot of people get more done more quickly. So I think I want to expand what I offer here. And then finally, LaunchFlows.com blog. I'm almost sure I've got that Weglot video in here. Somebody's selling LaunchFlow. I wonder why. LaunchFlows.com blog. And let me see if I can find it. Oh, let's just search for it here. I might have just put it into the documentation, quite frankly. I'll just look for it here for a second. But the idea is, I'm pretty sure it's inside of here, Weglot. The idea is that, nope. Perhaps I put it over on another one of my sites. Interesting. Well, I will look for where the video is because I'm fairly sure that it exists. Where let's do one more thing. Weglot WP Launchify. Let's see if I put it up there. There it is. So it's actually on my Launchify site. I have a couple videos on it. So if you go to the YouTube channel for WP Launchify, This actually is me going through
Paid spends from
using Weglot for an entire site setup with a multilingual offer with an order bump and more. That's it. That's enough. Hope you guys have a great morning. See you soon.